Good morning. Today we're going to be talking about copyright law and its impact in the classroom. This is just a good way to make sure that you understand the law so that you can follow it, and all of it ultimately comes down to respecting the people who create content while you do your work. Now, I understand that there are a lot of you who feel like nobody is really going to care or nobody's even going to notice that you're doing this. Of course, it's possible that nobody will see, but you need to be aware that there are actually a lot of people who spend so much time creating the content that they've made that they have quite a few ways these days that they can actually try to locate um, any sort of content that's being created without their permission or that's in violation of infringement because it's so important and even valuable, literally valuable to people who put in the time and effort. So if you take a chance with this and you don't take the proper precautions to get permissions or to do what's expected of you, you are going to get in trouble with the law. And I know that many of you are probably saying, well, I'm just a kid, I'm just a student. But that doesn't excuse you from any other law. Like if you're texting and driving, you have to follow that. Um, you have to follow curfew laws. There's all kinds of things that you're expected to do, and copyright law does apply to you also. And usually, when I get to this point, a lot of people start to ask, well, what am I supposed to do then? How am I supposed to even use any information that I find? And it's kind of natural to have that response, but you don't actually have to worry too much. You just need to first understand what copyright is, and then it becomes pretty clear how we can work within copyright while we are actually trying to complete all of the work that we need to do. So let's get into it. First of all, we need to establish what copyright is and how it works. So, copyright is quite literally the right given to the creator of a creative work to reproduce it or let other people make it. I mean, the word itself demonstrates to you exactly what copyright law is. We follow it because it's a good way to make sure that the people who create content get to keep creative control over it. And for some people, that means that's how they make their living. That's how they get paid. So we need to make sure that we give credit where credit is due to people who have put time, effort, energy, and money into creating these things instead of just taking it for ourselves. So the question, what does copyright protect, is very, very broad. Pretty much original creative works. That includes books or parts of books, poetry, short stories, movies, research, art, photographs and images, and a lot more. Even emails or things that you could write in your journal at home on your own can fall under copyright protections. It is so broad and so difficult to sort of protect people's creative work that copyright goes into effect the moment that a creative effort begins. So it's really important that you understand that even if it seems like something that's really low effort or easy to find or just posted somewhere, it still belongs to the person that created it. You'll notice that photographs and images have an asterisk here. There are some rules as students that we'll talk about later that apply to that, but I want to draw our attention to it because, especially when we do presentations or put together like research documents or things that we've been working on, and we're told to make it visually appealing, we have a tendency to sort of start just taking images from Google, and there can be some big pitfalls with that. So I just wanted to emphasize to you that there are rules surrounding photographs and images, and we'll go more in depth later about how you actually go about using those things in a way that's appropriate and respectful to the people who put in the time and effort to create them. So in addition to the moment of creation, there are additional protections that can be applied to copyright in order to sort of make sure that they recognize it. That's so, earlier I said that, you could write something in your journal and it automatically gets copyright. Well, that's very difficult to prove sometimes. So If you've ever seen that little logo that has a C with a circle around it, that means that it's a registered copyright, which means there's additional protections applied to it. But even beyond that, it's important to remember that anything you find could and really probably is in some way protected by copyright. So you need to be, again, careful about how you approach materials that you find, especially online. So a little bit about copyright infringement, and this is, where we're really talking about crossing that line and breaking a copyright law. So the word infringement refers to the fact that you or whoever is using this creative content is in some way infringing on copyright law. So it's important to know that it's not just about profit. It seems easy to say something like, oh, like this was just a post that somebody made, or this was like fan fiction even that somebody wrote. But it's still their work. And they are the ones who ultimately get to decide how and where their work is used. So it is, again, I have to emphasize, copyright infringement is breaking the law. Using somebody else's ideas without permission or not following the procedures that they've asked for is not legal. So a note on images, like I said before, you have probably in the past simply gone and copied and pasted an image from Google Images, but a lot of those pictures are copyright protected. Just because Google pulls it out for you doesn't mean that they've pulled out the permissions alongside with it. Sometimes, especially if you're searching for, famous actors or people from history, just because they come up at the top of the search results doesn't mean that you are allowed to use them, which means that if you take those pictures and you aren't sure that you have permission to use them, but you go ahead and do it, there's a pretty decent chance that you are actually infringing on copyright. And that almost certainly applies to modern images from modern news sources. So if you, for example, were doing a presentation about sports, and you took a modern picture of Dak Prescott from a recent ESPN upload, well, that image probably belongs to ESPN and the photographer that captured the picture. And because it's so modern, it's almost a guarantee that it is indeed copyright infringement. So you really need to be careful and follow the rules that we're going to talk about in a moment to make sure that you're using images and photographs appropriately. I know it's a lot to take in sort of at the front, but we do need to make sure that you stay safe and that you follow basically the guidelines to make sure that how you're approaching this is indeed legal. So there are actually still a lot of ways that you can accomplish accomplish the work that you need to do within the parameters set by copyright law. And fortunately, as a student, that gives you an especially large window of opportunity in order to actually follow copyright law and still get your work done. So here's a few things to help you with this process. First and foremost, when using anything that you find online, see if they have rules posted. They might have something that says that you just need to give credit to the creator in order to use it. Usually they'll have little notes at the bottom of a page or something online if you can get to the original source that will tell you. Ultimately, copyright owners get to decide how it works. So just make sure that, again, you're paying attention to the actual creator and getting to the original source before you start using any kind of information you find online. And even then, you should see if the school has invested in any resources that make it available for you to use. Like some photographers or people who create images will contribute their work into sort of a larger file or some sort of subscription. And so our school may have access to some of those subscriptions for you, so you don't even have to worry about it because we have already taken that step to invest in information and resources for you. Second, get permission. If possible, you can ask the creator. A lot of the time, there will be some contact information for whoever owns or is responsible for distributing a piece of information. And anytime that you have permission from the creator, you are good to go. So it might seem a little bit odd, but especially if you're doing something that is professional in nature or you're really trying to use some high quality sources, There are a lot of people that will let you reach out to them and get permission. And, if you let them know what you're using it for, that it's, for class or for academic purposes, they'll probably be all too happy to give you that opportunity. Now we're going to talk about fair use, which is a sort of a policy within copyright law that creates a space for you to be able to get stuff done. Because, likely at this point, you're thinking this is a lot to keep up with, and that's what fair use is for. It gives people a little bit more access to information, especially as things get more difficult to get permission for, or finding out the actual rules for it. So, a couple of things about fair use. A lot of the time you have to limit how much of something that you use in order to still be meeting fair use guidelines. So, for example, if you wanted to use music in a presentation or a video from a professional source or a source that makes money, you need to limit to about 10% of whatever that recording is in order to make sure that you are not going overboard and actually then committing copyright infringement. And then, of course, if you aren't sure if you're operating within fair use, simply don't do it. It's not worth the risk to you. And so if you aren't sure, don't do it. Wait, ask myself or your teacher, and we'd be happy to help and check in with the policy to see if it works for you. Public domain. This is a big one because it gives you access to a lot of stuff that you no longer have to worry about copyright permissions for. So public domain refers to works, especially older ones, that are basically not protected by copyright laws anymore. This especially applies to old works. So, for example, Shakespeare's entire anthology of work can be found and posted online because the copyright has expired on it, and so it's part of what's called the public domain. So you'd be surprised at what you can actually find in the public domain. There are some resources out there that sort of compile books or even academic journals that are part of the public domain. And of course, there are artists, photographers, writers, poets, whatever, who have works that they don't mind sharing, that they label for the public domain, or maybe they are older works on their own that maybe they don't make money from anymore that they might put in the public domain. So even just a quick search for public domain images or public domain poetry will be a fast and easy way to start finding some resources that might be useful for you. The only important note on that is you still can't claim it as your own because that's school policy for plagiarism. But as long as you can still cite the source, you are good to go. So, last thing, right? Kind of what I was just saying. Just because you're following all these rules, you can't quite put all of that in there because it's not your work. So copyright and plagiarism are two separate things, but there is some overlap there in understanding that, again, even stuff that you have permission to use, even stuff in the public domain, even stuff that falls under fair use, you still have to provide credit to the original creator. That is, sort of an essential thing, a normal expectation. So just make sure that for this class, you are following MLA citations and acknowledging the original creator of the work that you are using. So that's it. That's kind of a general overview. There are plenty of resources available for you to refer to for fair use policies so that you can understand it a little bit better. Again, keep in mind that limiting the information that you use from something can help you stay within fair use. So 10% of a song, you can use one image from a source at a time. So even if you had like a book of photography, you could use one image from that without worrying so much about following particular copyright laws. So there's a lot of sort of fine points to this, but the main thing is to see who the creator is, see what rules they've established for using their work, ask permission if you need to, and then limit what you are using for stuff that falls outside of public domain.